I can't find the video.
They can't have like fast. They must be
Jamie, could you turn the light off? Taylor, Taylor, turn on the projector.
And a high price for.
Oh, I put on the causes of the Great Depression. I filmed that class, Causes of the Great Depression. I put that online, for my webpage for the class. And there must be somebody. What's that, Al?
I'm sorry. We're explaining that.
I know. We'll talk about it later. And somebody put on. I got an email almost immediately saying, "Are you suffering from depression? The greatest way to solve depression is." Yeah, so I got an ad for depression. I thought that was pretty funny. Pull the screen down, Taylor. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Like memory cards and how the bigger, more memory, like more than cost.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no difference in the construction of memory cards. It's cheaper and kill the memory card that allows us to.
Yeah, I've actually read that too. Yeah. It's a scam. All right, here we go.
By 1933, reminders of the Great Depression were everywhere.
Now, apples were one of the symbols of the Great Depression because with so many people unemployed in cities, they thought, hey, let's have people go sell apples. We'll make a living that way. And they won't lose their faith in themselves. Well, who's going to buy apples? Who's going to survive on this? And so that became one of the symbols. By the way, this is Looney Tunes.
For more than 3 years, it had devastated the American economy. But with the inauguration of President Franklin Roosevelt, even cartoons began to reflect a new optimism. The challenge for Roosevelt's New Deal would be putting America back to work. And nowhere would that challenge be greater than in the city of New York, with its more than 1 million unemployed.
Like the cartoon? I like it. But it's just a short little one. It's one of those 8-minute ones. How bad things were and everything's good. It's a blatant ad for FDR, which I think is kind of funny. That's New York, New Deal. So, with that, I want to show you that cartoon, and let's go ahead and get into.
They didn't know I heard that.
Okay, want to make sure. All right, so SEC, FCC were two of the big ones, and let's get one more. The gold standard. This might have been the biggest thing Roosevelt did. April 1933, he brought the country off the gold standard. England did it first a year ago. Roosevelt actually pledged he would not do it in the beginning of April. No, that's not. And at the end of the week, or 1 week later, made it very clear he's going to get off the gold standard. 1933, April 1933. It's not included as one of the bills because basically it was just an interpretation of a law that already existed. It just said that the federal government will not redeem gold for dollars anymore. That's all it said. But once it got that, that allowed for the Treasury and the Federal Reserve to inflate the currency. They could create inflation. Remember, the big problem is deflation. Prices are dropping, the economy shrinking. This had an immediate effect. Immediate. More money in circulation. It solved the problem of interest rates, allowed for more lending in a way, and also allowed people to pay back their debt. Because inflated currency allows them to pay back their debt with dollars of lower value. This was huge. Going off the gold standard had an immediate economic effect. Immediate. Probably more than any of the other bills that he passed in the first New Deal that got passed of relief and recovery. The gold standard was big. In 46, the US would kind of go back on the gold standard. It's complex. It's called the Bretton Woods Agreement. And then in 1971, the country totally got off the gold standard. And just to give you an example why going on the gold standard or going off the gold standard was good. Yes, the crash in 2008 was bad, but the US could manipulate the value of the currency. That helped a lot. Britain could do this, but countries on the euro couldn't. That's like being on the gold standard. The Greek economy crashed. Italy crashed. Ireland totally crashed because they're on the euro. They couldn't manipulate the currency. They couldn't inflate it.
Just because it was.
Because they're tied to the euro. So they're tied to the central bank of Europe. Oh, they all did in some different degrees, but their economy was more fragile. The housing bubble hit them more. Yeah.
So is that like why when Germany had its big crash, it was like everything was like thousands of dollars?
Germany was, in 23, that was a little different. That was Germany purposely doing it to pay back their debt. Germany actually tried to stay on the gold standard in the Great Depression, and it destroyed them, led to Hitler. Yeah.
What's the argument for the gold standard?
Well, the gold standard, people have this vision that the gold standard implies stability. People don't like the idea that the dollar does not represent value in something else. That the dollar is just where the dollar because we say so.
So it's just like people.
Yeah, and it also helps, it can help banks because it causes deflation. Yeah, I hear people all the time tell me, people tell me, adults, if ever this comes up, they'll say, oh, we should get back on the gold standard so people know what dollars are worth. And I'm like, do you even know what you're talking about? It all depends how ornery I feel. If I'm feeling really ornery, then I'm saying, usually I just say, do you want to be Greece? I like the Greeks. They're nice people.
People don't get the references.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're really giving someone.
All right, so back to this then. It worked really well. Britain got off it. Sweden got off it. Okay, Britain had their own issues. Sweden got off it, got out of the depression pretty quickly, did something else. Once Hitler took power, they got off the gold standard. The economy began to go. France refused to get off the gold standard. They saw it as a source of national pride, and their economy never really recovered in the Great Depression. And that's really going to hurt them when World War II begins. Really hurt them. And so the gold standard is a big issue. And yeah, the United States kind of went on it again, but it's more complex than the old system. And so that's the first New Deal. And one thing we have to write down, it ended the free fall. Going into 34, because of getting off the gold standard and the other bills helping confidence in the banking especially, the economy began to grow again. Unemployment was still incredibly high. But the actual country quit slipping. Still in the depression, long-term unemployment. So it's clear the New Deal had great effect, but it still didn't solve that problem of long-term unemployment. And there's going to be immediate opposition to Roosevelt. So write down opposition. And the opposition is going to be huge. And the opposition comes from two sides. The opposition. Now, remember we talked about, I mentioned this once before, right and left of the political sphere. And that comes from the French Revolution, where they sat in the National Assembly. So for your right, that means they're more conservative, they're more social Darwinistic, they want a monarchy. What is the ultimate right-wing government? This is your right, I know. Dictatorship. What kind of dictatorship, though? It's the name for it. It's some, well, it's more common, fascism. And then on your left, that's my right, your left, it's more socialist, communist. What's the most left? Anarchist. Now, Stalin, it's not a straight line. And I'll explain, it's more of a circle. It's more or like a horseshoe. But the opposition. So let's do the left first. These are people that thought Roosevelt wasn't doing enough. Now, Roosevelt thought very middle of the road. He called himself a liberal. He's a liberal. He's going to do some of the prescriptions that socialists might like, but he wants to save capitalism. He still wants the basic elements of capitalism there. So he is a capitalist. He is not a communist or a socialist at all. But he's going to be accused of this. But communists and socialists grew to hate FDR. Hate him. Hate him. What do they want to happen to capitalism? Go away. Roosevelt's saving it. Roosevelt's saving capitalism. And by the way, you still see some people on the left today, on the further left, and they will criticize Roosevelt for that. And Roosevelt saved capitalism, and look what it's done to us now. So they don't like him. There's going to be some in the Roosevelt administration, and they're going to be called fellow travelers. They're basically liberals, but they toyed with socialism. They're basically pro-Roosevelt, but they're thinking, God, maybe capitalism has too many flaws. Let's look at socialism. Let's look at communism. And they're intellectuals. Now remember, intellectual means somebody who thinks things through, they're nuanced, they're pragmatic. Doesn't mean they're right, or doesn't necessarily mean they're smart. But these kind of people. And they toyed with it. Upton Sinclair, remember him from the jungle? He was a fellow traveler. Henry Wallace, the Secretary of the Agriculture, he was a fellow traveler. He would actually become a socialist eventually. Some would be, kind of toy with it, then go back. Now, this is just one of the things you would expect in a depression. But after, Cody, what's that?
What were they?
They were some people, they're mainly liberals like FDR, but they kind of toyed with socialism. Fellow travelers after the World War II, they're going to be accused of being what? And actually now we're communists. Well, I'm throwing anarchists are gone. Now it's just communists.
McDonald's se preguntó, ¿cómo impresionar a quien ama tanto el pollo? ¿A quien le dedica canciones y plazas? ¿A quien usa pollo como apodo? ¿Cómo sorprender a quien tanto lo venera? Nuevos y crujientes Chicken Select Tenders, 100% carne blanca de pollo.
It's a nice video.
Why?
Maybe Spanish.
Northfield had in substance
It's this really good video on the dropping of the atomic bomb from the World War series. And for some reason it played a... Okay! That was kind of scary. All right, so next. There are a couple individuals we have to get who thought Roosevelt wasn't doing enough, but they were more on a particular issue. Dr. Francis Townsend. Dr. Francis Townsend wanted a large old age pension, $200 a month, which was a lot then. And this had great appeal. He said this is the best way to get the country out of the Depression, having a good, big old age pension. And remember I mentioned this before. Up to the New Deal, old age meant what? Well, not death, poverty. It's poverty. You're poor. And it has two big things what an old age pension will do. By giving the elderly a little bit of money, they'll spend it right away. That will increase demand in the economy. But there's another thing. Think about how this will change everything for people and their families. So people who are getting near to the time when they can't work anymore, retirement is not really a word yet. People work until they're dead, or they are simply unable to work. Well, eventually. In the long run, we all are, but that's life. I'm sorry. John Maynard Keynes would say that, and that's coming. But in the short run, this is what it will do. Families will no longer have to worry about caring for their elderly parents. What a massive I have burden on my mind, but that's not it. It lifted a massive burden off their mind. That's what I meant to say, but I said it incorrectly. You don't have to care for your parents. They'll have a pension. They'll be fine. And they don't want to be a burden on their children. And so this will increase demand two ways. It'll get money into the hands of the elderly so they'll no longer be impoverished and they'll buy things. And allow for families to make many more decisions based upon themselves and not worried about caring for their elderly parents. This would change the whole dynamic. When people start getting older And I'm thinking, my God, I'm nearly done. I can't work much longer. What am I going to do? It takes away that pressure. Now, it was too big of a pension. $200 a month would have been more than the government could afford. But towns and clubs went up all over the country. That's how strong this issue was. And pushed Roosevelt. Now, Roosevelt would have liked an old age pension, but he didn't think he'd get it passed. But with the people pushing and demanding, they won it. Now Roosevelt has cover to do what? Ask for what bill?
Social Security.
Yeah, the Social Security Act. And that's how politics works. It was opposition from the left who wanted to do more. And if these people wouldn't have gone out, it would have been hard to do Social Security. No, they demanded it. And they got it. Now, Social Security is not going to be near as big. But this will change everything. Social Security is Roosevelt's other most favorite, most beloved program he started after the TVA. Social Security changed everything. And all you have to do is talk about, I want to get rid of Social Security. President Bush did this in 2005. And that's what also people go, whoa, wait a second.
He said he wanted to get.
Yeah, he wanted to turn into a privately funded thing in the stock market. After seeing what happened in 2008, woo, that'd be fun. Stock market dropped by 60%. But the point is, when people remember, conservatives hate those type of programs. That goes against trickle-down economics, and it goes against social Darwinism. Hey, make your retirement for yourself. Okay, we'll come back to this, but this is big. Next, Huey Long, the kingfish. He's the kingfish. The kingfish, meaning the big fish.
That's just right. It's funny.
He ran Louisiana. He ran it. His family ran it. He was at first governor of Louisiana, and then he was senator. His brothers would be governor, senators for Louisiana up to the 1980s. Huey Long ran the state of Louisiana, and he was known for providing food or providing aid for the poor during the Depression. He did something crazy in Louisiana. He made sure that there was actually public education, at least for white folks, and they had crazy things. You might want to grab your desk. Buildings, textbooks. Huey Long was an interesting guy. He also took kickbacks. He was a little bit corrupt. He's all over the place. Huey Long at first was all with Roosevelt, but then he thought Roosevelt didn't go far enough. And then he became a major opponent. He wanted him to go further. And he created what's called Share Our Wealth Clubs. And soon there's going to be millions of members all over the United States. His slogan, every man is a king. He has a great autobiography, Every Man is a King. It's really interesting. Huey Long is a character. In some ways I really like it, and in some ways I'm kind of frightened by it. He kind of had this little totalitarian dictatorship element, and also just, he's really interesting. And basically what he wanted to do was tax all the excess wealth of the rich that rich people have and give it to everybody else. So, no incomes over 1 million. No inheritance over 5 million. So, if you make $10 million a year, 9 million of it's going to be taxed. If your inheritance was $10 million, 5 million of it's going to be taxed, taken away. Yes.
Does that mean that if you didn't make over $1 million, you're just going to get taxed at all?
At the regular income tax rate. Actually, it's not clear. This is a club.
How much is $1 million today?
Million, looking at anywhere from 20 to 40 million, depending on how you figure it out compared to productivity. It's a lot of money. What else? Everybody's going to get a $5,000 homestead, and everybody, $1,000 a year guaranteed income.
How much was it? 1,000. Would that have actually worked? Like, economically, was that possible?
Maybe it would have. There wasn't enough money in the hands of the wealthy to do this. It would have to change the way they do the tax code. I mean, because you could get rid of some things if everyone's guaranteed income. Switzerland is very close to doing something very similar to this, by the way, the guaranteed income. Now, there's problems with this, especially considering the fact that the country's in depression. If you do this kind of taxation, it'll take a lot of money out of the economy. I mean, there's issues with this. But doesn't this sound good? If you don't have a job and don't make much money. Huey Long by 1935 looked like he was going to be running for president as a third party, the share our wealth party. It looked like he might become the spoiler in the race because if he enters in 36, who's he going to take votes away from? Roosevelt. And that will allow who to win. I told you. Who's going to win? Yes. No. I told you, Alf. Alf Landon, the Republican, who ran against FDR in 36, tried to make sure the Republican would win. Remember, we have a winner-take-all. Third party takes away votes. It's one of the great what-ifs in history. But in this really ugly capital that Huey Long's going to have built in Baton Rouge, it's a big, ugly tower. God, it's an ugly capital. Not the ugliest, but it's pretty darn close. South Dakota. South Dakota looks like a really ugly department store. But he was assassinated on the front steps of the brand new Capitol building he had built. Did everyone hear that? No, you didn't. Yeah. Yeah, it was all Louisiana politics. It had nothing to do with national politics. A man, what was it, Dr. Parker, his brother lost his job. Is it Blaine Long? Yeah. But the point is, we don't know. It really is one of the great wonders in history. Government? All right. If you go there to Louisiana, you can see the really ugly capital in Baton Rouge, which is kind of a neat town, and this kind of figure of this huge statue of Huey Long doing this. All right, so let's get to right-wing opposition then. On the right, we're talking more conservative. And for the most part, conservatives, now we're talking economically, so they're trickle down. They hate them because they hate regulation. They don't want any government regulation. They don't want regulation of the stock market. They don't want regulation of the banks. They don't want to enforce antitrust laws like Roosevelt would. They don't want government controls. They don't want worker safety. They don't want a 40-hour work week. They don't want child labor laws. And you see every once in a while conservatives propose that again. New senator from Arkansas just proposed to get rid of child labor laws. And I'm thinking that's great.
What's the justification?
Kids got to work. Yes.
Whatever has happened.
About what? It's still being. So, pay regulation. Yeah, basically, this will allow for more employment opportunities for everybody. They are doing this.
Doesn't that take away employment opportunities?
Yes.
though?
And they hate any programs that help the poor. Now, there's an economic reason for supply side. Any program that helps the poor or unemployed, oh, by the way, there's a term for it. They hate, it's called a safety net. I think I mentioned this before. That has the effect of raising wages because people are not as desperate, so they might not take as low wages. And it's against social Darwinism. If you give the poor, the unemployed, aid, what will they do? They'll waste it and they'll quit working, which is always a fascinating argument. You give somebody just a tiny little bit to survive, and they think, I am just barely surviving. The good life. I don't see that, but I think it's more complex than that. Yeah, some people might, but still, they hate it. So they want no regulations. So going into the summer of 33, they looked at the New Deal, and they also want to stay on the gold standard. They don't like gold standard. They don't want inflation. They looked at Roosevelt and said, oh my God, not only is he a traitor to our class, He's a commie. We got to get rid of him. No, traitor to our class, the upper class. Roosevelt was an upper class. So, he was wealthy. Oh, very wealthy. Very, very wealthy. Yeah, he was a traitor to the wealthy class. I'll tell you one story about that in a sec. But this began organization of an attempted armed overthrow of Franklin Roosevelt. Summer of 1933, some of the richest people in the United States tried to figure out a way to overthrow and replace Roosevelt with somebody else. This is a pretty scary thing. It's called a coup. The leader, well, there's a number of people. There are some Rockefellers involved. There are some Goulds. There's an argument whether or not there are any Bushes involved. There was Henry Ford might have been a silent partner in this. But the leaders were a couple brothers in the Pierre and Charles DuPont. DuPont into chemicals. They make a lot of money on chemicals, paint, but also all kinds of chemicals. Very wealthy, very aristocratic family, and they decided we got to get rid of him. Who do they want to replace Roosevelt with? None. More than that. They looked at this democracy and they said, wait a second, if you let people vote, they'll vote for people like Roosevelt. We can't have this. We can't have this anymore. We need fascism. They were fascists. Fascist is the most right-wing government. I'll tell you more about that on Monday. But the man who came up with the term for this right-wing totalitarian government, in fact, came up with the term totalitarian, was an Italian, a former socialist, by the way, by the name of Benito Mussolini. And that's who they wanted. They wanted Mussolini. Well, they just wanted somebody like Mussolini. They saw Mussolini as their hero. Now, don't get me wrong. If you would have asked them in 1933, they would have said there's lots of good things about Hitler, but we like Mussolini more.
So wasn't Mussolini the leader of Italy?
Yeah, he's a, but they wanted somebody like him.
Oh, so they didn't want specific.
No, but and so Mussolini took power by having veterans of World War I march on Rome, called the Black Shirts, in 1922. They forced the king to end the Republic and give power to Mussolini. Army, veterans, hadn't that already happened? The bonus army, that's what they thought. We can create another bonus army, but this time equip them, give them uniforms, give them food, and have them march on Washington, D.C. How would they get them to do it? Well, they have to find a leader, because they knew they're not going to go march for DuPont. They need to find a charismatic leader. So they went to the most decorated soldier in the United States military up to that time. They went to General Smedley Butler. Remember, we saw him in that speech he gave to the bonus army. They went to Butler and they said, would you be willing to lead this march? And we'll make you kind of the figurehead. It was going to be called the Secretary of the Homeland, and he would be the figurehead, but they would create a fascist dictatorship. Butler listened to him. Said, let me think about it. Walked out. What did he do? He immediately went to the White House and told Roosevelt. Butler hated those guys' guts. Remember I told you, I just mentioned that Butler wrote a book? His book was called War is a Racket. Meaning all this for people to get rich off. That's his experience in Nicaragua and Cuba and Dominican Republic. He hated these guys. Now Roosevelt has a problem. If he announces it, what's going to happen? Well, his worry was this will prove that the communists are right and capitalism was corrupt. He was really scared. So even though they all fled the country, he basically made it clear, I'm not going to have you arrested, but I'm watching. He was worried this would trigger a communist rebellion. He was really scared. Now looking back at it, hindsight's a beautiful thing. Should have arrested him. They committed treason. Should have arrested him. That's what I think. Tell you my personal feeling, man. This is not me saying, yeah, historical fact. No, they should have arrested him. That's what I think. But he didn't. And so they continued to fund, they continued to give money towards conservatives. trickle-down economics, and mostly Republican. Gotta add one more thing. I know the bell's about ready to ring. Add Father Coughlin, one more conservative. Father Coughlin had the most popular radio show in America. And at first he was very pro-Roosevelt, but then he became anti-Roosevelt. Then he's bringing communism. And then he became more and more, here's Father Coughlin right here, more and more anti-Semitic, meaning he called them Rosa Jew and Rosafeld, which is a Jewish name, Rosenberg, and saying that he's going to bring this Jewish communism.
Was he a priest?
Yes, he was a Catholic. He was a father. He was a father. He was a Catholic priest.
Well, yeah, no, you said that on the mic.
He'd be the most popular radio program until December of 1941. Oh, I didn't tell you the story. Don't let me forget. I'll tell you the story about the traitor to the class tomorrow. We'll do the second New Deal tomorrow. What? Have a great day, everybody. Jamie drew FDR talking on fire. Wow.
I drew him as a s'more.
As a s'more?
Yeah, that's cute.